Okay, Paul, today's quick fix is written communication. What do we mean here?
Hey Matt, hello everybody. We're going to talk about written communication, but maybe we should write about it a little bit as well, I guess. But I mean, it's really interesting because written communication has expanded so much. We've talked about how verbal communication has shrunk a little bit, but we're doing so much more writing than we used to across so many more different media. So you can think of written communication in its broadest sense as every message that you send, whether it is in the longest form possible, like a book, all the way down to a tweet, or if I don't know what a tweet is today on X,
Yeah.
whatever that
I don't
thing is
know.
people do on X. But it's longest all the way down to the shortest. And interestingly, we would include that as, let's say, for example, that you were doing a Instagram reel. If you wrote it, that's also a form of written communication, even though ultimately you might be delivering it in a verbal format as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, in today's workplace, it's gone from being something that a few people needed to do well inside an organization, the communications team
Mm.
needed to do well inside an organization, to something that really everybody needs to do well. So it's been a dramatic shift towards written communication in the workplace, and that's benefited some people, and it's caused some other people some real challenges.
Mm. And why do you think people struggle with it?
Well, one thing obviously is that the type of written communication that is needed, particularly in the workplace, um, which can be sometimes very short, very direct, particularly if it's like a response to a Slack message or something along those lines, um, is not the form that we're taught at school most of the time.
Yeah.
Right. Even when we're taught business communications, you'll notice if you did any form of like business communication stuff at at school, even in business school and so on, it's often overly formal and overly flowery and so on, and you very quickly adapt and adjust to a different format that does work and is in keeping with the environment. So there's part of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're not being taught what's actually needed, and particularly what's actually needed across all of these different types of media. But then the other thing as well is that the by and large the art of this comes not from understanding how you are right, how you yourself are sending this out. It's understanding how other people are receiving it. So, for example, the tone of a message that you send out can feel positive to you as the sender, but is often received in a way that is much more negative
Yeah.
than you intended. So this gap that exists between you as the sender and whoever the receiver is a gap where uncertainty emerges and a lack of clarity occurs. And if you don't understand that, if you don't understand how people are receiving the message that you're sending, then you can create an impression of yourself and of the work that you're doing that is not what you intended in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Text messaging is the worst culprit
Yeah.
in in this. A simple response that you had no meaning attached to can be received so differently on the other end. Um,
Well, yeah, and let's think about the nature of misunderstanding, because people often think about one aspect here, which is clarity. So they're like, "Oh, I intended, I meant X, and they received Y because I put a comma in the right place."
yeah.
There
Yeah.
was that book a few years ago, Eat, Shoots, and Leaves, which talks about that exact challenge, like clarity of communication. But that's only one way in which misunderstanding occurs,
Yeah.
right? You can create an emotional misunderstanding, to your point, by sending a text that just feels dispassionate when you supposedly have a meaningful and closer relationship with somebody, right? And you and I have known each other for years and years now, Matt. And I might, because we've known each other for years, right? I might just send something like running late or
Yeah.
whatever. And if your mood is a certain way, you might be like, oh, he's running late. If your mood is another way, it might be like, well, how about why, or
Yeah.
or what's going on?
Yeah.
In one mood, you might be like, is he okay? In another mood, you're like, well, he didn't respect my time. There's all those kind of different things that can emerge because the words that I type don't have intonation, right? Whereas if I picked up the phone and I called you and I said, hey man, I'm so sorry, I'm running late,
Yeah.
right? And you
Yeah.
could hear the stress in my
Yeah. Yeah.
voice.
Yeah.
You would know that it's not to do with you, it's to do with something that's going on. Whereas if I pick up the phone at the same time and says, hey, I'm running late,
Yeah.
and then put the phone down,
Yeah.
those are two totally different things. Text message, they're exactly the same.
Yeah. 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 Fascinating. Yeah. So that's interesting, right? So talk about what does effective writing look like? Because in that instance, you wrote effectively.
Yeah. Yes. And this is really interesting. And one of the things that I worry about just a little bit in terms of some of the stuff that is presented around writing effectively in written communication is that I think it can capture some of the elements that are needed, but it often doesn't capture all of the elements. And so in the research that I've done on this, I've tried to make sure that we're capturing all elements of what is effective writing, even if some of these elements may be of less importance, some of them may be of more importance. But the thing that we found to be most effective with people is really what I would refer to as a layered approach, whereby basically you're thinking of 4 layers of communication that take you from being sort of functionally okay all the way through to being excellent. So the first layer is just is real, right? And so there are a couple of elements to this, right? But when we say real, there's the first element of real is it true, right? So in other words, am I if I'm telling you that X is the case, is that what is actually the case, right? So I am running 5 minutes late. That's functionally true, right? Assuming I am running five minutes late. So there, with this reality layer, that's about being clear. It's about being upfront, and it's about not burying the message, right? So I can't remember if I said this, but all of these layers begin with an R, so it's nice and easy,
Okay.
4 R's, right? The second one is receivable, and so this is about making sure that I get to the point. The sentences are short enough so that it's easy for somebody else to understand and that it's easy to follow. So that I'm running 5 minutes late thing again it passes that test, right? Because it's short and it does help you understand what is it's easy to follow. The third one is relevant, right? So this is the idea of giving the other party the information that is most important to them, right? And that is circumstantial, right? So for example, in that exact scenario, I'm running 5 minutes late. That might be, under certain circumstances, enough, but it might not be in other circumstances. So let's say that you and I were going to a meeting together and I was running 5 minutes late. Then what might be appropriate there would be, I'm running 5 minutes late. Can you begin the meeting without me, please? Right? That now that's relevant to you because without that, you don't know what you're supposed to do by virtue of the fact that I'm running 5 minutes late. You might say, I'm running 5 minutes late. Can you start the meeting without me, please? I'm sorry, or something like this. That's also relevant because then that's helping you understand that I regret that, right?
Yeah.
And so that's okay too. But what you don't want in that circumstance is I'm running 5 minutes late because there was stuff in the middle of town that caused me to reroute my car, and then I had to park it away all the way over here,
Yeah.
and blah 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 blah. All of that is irrelevant news. And there's a line from the British version of the Office which talks about this specifically. There's a bit where David Brent, who is the Michael Scott character in the British version, where he says, "Oh, I've got bad news and good news," and he says the bad news is that they're closing down this facility, and some of you are going to get fired, and the rest of you are going to have to relocate across the country if you want to. And the good news is that I've been promoted, and I'm going to be running the new office, right? And they, of course, all look at him blankly and said, "No, that is bad news and irrelevant news." So you get the point there, right? So
Yeah.
this is a lot of where irrelevance comes in is when it becomes all about you and not about the, what is relevant to the other party. And then the last piece of it, which is really where a lot of the art comes in, is resonant. And so that is around making the tone fit the situation you're in. Warm when needed, direct when needed, and making sure that it is appropriate to not just the person, but the circumstances under which you're communicating all of this. So
Mm.
real, receivable, relevant, resonant, all kind of layer on top of each other. And by the way, we talked last week about verbal communication. The same thing, all of this applies
Sure.
to verbal communications as well. You can just be, you can be much more um, really thoughtful about adding these layers in when you're doing it in a written scenario because you have time to prepare.
And almost the like a structure helps there, right?
Yes, yeah, and so the structure piece of it is really interesting. Um, some folks, I've mentioned it before on the podcast. Some folks might be aware of a book called Smart Brevity, and it is a book that I'd recommend, and we'll put in the show notes. Um, the one thing I would just be cautious of is that even if you have like a structure like they propose, for example, in Smart Brevity, be careful about overusing that, and be careful about using about the circumstances in which you do use it, because there are going to be times where you do want to be like very clear in your communications and structure it in a particular way where you kind of give people like the top line and why it matters and what it's resonant for them and so on. But you also don't want every communication you do to feel like a press briefing. So you got to make
Yeah.
sure that you're thinking about the principles associated with this, but then also being authentically you as you're delivering all of that.
That reminds me of the I forget who the quote was. Sounds like it'd be something Mark Twain said, but if I had more time, this letter would have been shorter.
Blaise Pascal.
There you go. Not
Yeah,
not Mark Twain, but yeah, yeah.
yeah, but
I
I've
lo-
often misattributed to Mark Twain. But
oh, is
yeah,
that right? Okay, so
yeah, yeah,
it was up in there rattling around somewhere. Um,
yeah, yeah.
so so with that in mind, what's what about using AI for writing now?
um, it's okay, but you got to think. I think about carefully about how. Folks might have seen a couple of weeks ago there was a news story that kind of blew up online. A news. This is going to sound very meta, but it was a news story about a news story. There was I think it was the largest English language written newspaper in Pakistan, and it was a front page news story. Folks can look it up about the economics of the automobile industry, and this beautifully written piece on page one of the newspaper, and at the bottom of it, it said, um, would you like me to break it down into different
I saw
points that
that.
can, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Oops.
literally the most amazing thing about that, and this is something that I really caution us all about, right? Is yeah, you can see, oh, this is, journalism is short and all this kind of stuff. But here's the most amazing thing about this. This went out in a physical newspaper that was published. So what that tells you is the journalist missed it, the copy editor missed it, and then the overall, these things get checked 3 times
Yeah, yeah,
when you're publishing a newsletter,
yeah,
the equivalent of what used to be a typesetter.
yeah,
And so all 3 of those parties missed it. And what that tells you, of course, is that we're developing a society where we're so accustomed to seeing this stuff that we're not that our
blind to
brains
it.
are filtering it out. And we're just like, oh yeah, that looks great.
Yeah,
So our attention to detail when we're looking through this stuff and putting our own voice on it is not there as it used to be. So what does that mean? I think what that means is that it's great to use AI early on in the writing process, but you good written communications is an opportunity to provide people with your voice. You and I have spoken about this, Matt. We have when I interview guests on the podcast, if I've read their book and they actually wrote it themselves,
hmm,
I kind of know who I'm going to be
yeah,
interviewing based on their voice, based on what's happening. And you want to maintain that. You want to have that idea where when somebody reads what you've written,
yeah,
if they meet you, they're not that it feels like those 2 things are connected to each other. So don't let AI destroy your
yeah.
authenticity, because if it does, then when you're having that second and third communication with them verbally, they're going to get a lot of cognitive dissonance and it's going to separate them from you.
Yeah. Maybe another topic for another time, but I'd love to talk about the voice of the different mainstream AIs,
Yeah.
because I find them to have different personalities, the wrong word, but they definitely have different personalities in how it interprets what you're doing and how it interprets what you feed it and what you get out. And they're extremely different in the way you shape those personalities as a thought partner. So it'd be an interesting topic for another day.
Well, you've accidentally segued us into something that we're going to be doing actually over the next couple of months, which is that we're going to have a couple of longer form discussions that are specifically about AI, and are going to be looking at the safeguards that we need to put in place to make sure that AI and humans can interact successfully in the workplace in a way that isn't sort of destroying humans.
Mm-hmm.
Can be part of that discussion. So let's make sure we do that.
Excellent, excellent. All right, so let's get one simple thing this week that somebody can do in this space.
I think it's what you do before you hit send. And so what I would challenge people to do is just, they can do it one time, they can do it multiple times this week. But when you're writing that response to an email or you're writing that response to a text, before you hit the send button, read through it as though you're the other party listening to it. Stop and pause and do that. And one thing I like to do, don't normally recommend products on here, but there's a product I use called Speechify,
Mm-hmm.
and I get the premium version, so it actually has sort of actors' voices. They have Gwyneth Paltrow, they have Snoop Dogg, they have Mr. Beast, they have various these other parties. Excuse me. And so and they read it aloud, right? So the point here is that there's something different about that. So if I write something and then Gwyneth Paltrow reads it back to me, what I wrote, I inadvertently, well, first off, I often spot little mistakes that I have just glazed over. But secondly, I often start to think, I don't know if that was clear enough, or I
Right,
don't know if
right.
that was resonant enough, or any of those specific things. So you don't have to use Speechify, but definitely take that pause and then hit send. We should
I
get we should get Speechify to sponsor the
I
podcast after
am
that, Matt.
I am getting that immediately, and I'm gonna have Snoop Dogg read all my emails back to me because that sounds wonderful. All right, Paul. Written communication fixed. What's the next interview folks are gonna see in their feed?
Well, Matt, if this was a Friends episode, I think you'd call it the one where Paul gets emotional. I spoke to Bill Kirst. He's got a great podcast, by the way, that I would recommend. It's called Coffee and Change. But he's also written a series of essays about AI. They've been published in a book. It's called Leading Change in the Era of AI. I'm holding it up there for the people who view this on YouTube. And Bill's making a plea for us keeping our humanity as this onslaught of AI happens. And I'll be honest, Matt, it made me stop and think about just about everything I've been doing over the last 4 or 5 years. So, and you were listening in to that, Matt. What did you make of it?
Yeah, same reaction. Especially being, in a a leadership position, having to bring on AI into the business world and doing it responsibly, doing it thoughtfully. Really, it makes you think about our obligation, given that we are going to be responsible for, at least for the time being, the ethical guardrails that don't exist yet in this space. So there's a lot of decisions that need to be made given the tool's capabilities. It's really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's going to be on Thursday, and we'll be back next Tuesday to do another one of these. Which one are we doing next Tuesday, Matt?
Conflict?
Yes, conflict resolution.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll do that. We'll do conflict resolution next Tuesday, but don't miss the Bill Kirst interview because, as I say, that was a really powerful one.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Well, we'll look forward to both of those and see you next week.
All right. Thanks, Paul.